Have you ever felt that the part of yourself you're most afraid of might actually be the key to your healing? What if the darkness you reject is the doorway to the divine? That's the heart of what shadow work is all about. To embrace one's own shadow is not simply a psychological exercise, it is a sacred spiritual discipline and a profound catalyst for spiritual growth. In honoring the shadow, we touch the edges of the divine. As Jungian analyst Robert A. Johnson once wrote, "To own one's shadow is to reach a holy place, an inner center, not attainable in any other way." As a child, Johnson nearly died in a car accident. During that near-death experience, he encountered a radiant world beyond form. The blackness he was immersed in became ecstasy. He saw golden visions, but when he was revived, those visions vanished, and he spiraled into despair. Therapy taught him a vital truth. Only through human experience could he rediscover what he had seen, not by escaping life, but by entering it fully. This marked a turning point in his spiritual growth. Johnson often struggled with the demands of the outer world. He identified with Parsifal, the innocent fool of myth. When he met Carl Jung, everything changed. Jung encouraged solitude, a dedicated space for inner work and trust in the unconscious. External achievements were not essential. What mattered was inner transformation and authentic spiritual growth. Do your inner work. Jung told him, everything else will follow. At 54, Johnson traveled alone to India. After a long, exhausting journey and having lost his luggage, he arrived at his hotel and collapsed in weariness. But then he glanced out the window. In that moment, the golden world returned. It wasn't a place. It was a state of consciousness always accessible. The divine is not elsewhere. It is within. In owning your own shadow, Johnson shows that the water of life flows inward. The shadow, often misunderstood, is not evil. It's the part of ourselves we've neglected. It holds our unlived life, our buried energy, and yes, our gold. Shadow work helps us reclaim this hidden power. The shadow is not a devil to be avoided, but a missing part of our soul to be reclaimed. Sometimes the shadow holds the shadow of a criminal might contain vulnerability and tenderness. The shadow of a timid person might hold power and assertiveness. When we present only the socially acceptable parts of ourselves, repressing our true emotions, we sow resentment. That resentment doesn't vanish. It enters the shadow where it grows and is later projected onto others. To deny our darkness is to deny half of ourselves. Wholeness demands we make peace with all that we are. The shadow only becomes hostile when we ignore it. Either we integrate it with awareness, or it pulls us into unconscious patterns. To be led by your shadow is better than being dragged by it. Sanctity isn't perfection, it's integration. Jung understood this deeply. The ego and the shadow are born from the same source. Light and darkness are inseparable. To create light is to cast a shadow. If you cannot see your shadow, you are likely living from it. Others often recognize it before we do. Culture teaches us to fragment ourselves. We are born whole, but split by societal expectations. This is the legacy of the tree of knowledge, dividing life into good and evil. In flattening us, culture not only represses our flaws, but also buries our nobility. As Johnson said, people resist the noble aspects of their shadow more strenuously than they hide the dark sides. Hero worship is a coping mechanism. It's easier to admire someone else's greatness than to claim our own. Many only find their inner gold after illness or suffering. Pain becomes initiation. This mirrors the archetype of the wounded healer, the shaman who falls ill and discovers wisdom through healing himself. Religion in its truest form reconnects what has been broken. It leads us to paradox, not contradiction. Johnson compares the psyche to a seesaw. One side holds traits we accept, the other holds traits we deny. No trait vanishes, it just shifts sides. If the seesaw tilts too far, we risk a psychic collapse. This mirrors the breakdowns we see in society: conflict, addiction, rage, war. The psyche, like the body, requires balance. In Faust, Goethe offers a mythic reflection of this truth. Faust, despairing, meets Mephistopheles, his shadow. Through this relationship, Faust rediscovers passion, and Mephistopheles finds love. Love becomes the sacred fire that unites opposites. We are made whole not by resisting the dark, but by letting love embrace it. Johnson shares a vivid memory. After hosting rude guests with saint-like patience, he rewarded himself with a visit to the nursery. There, he picked a fight with the shopkeeper, his shadow bursting forth. He hadn't dealt with it consciously, so it erupted clumsily. The shadow always seeks balance. If ignored, it will find its own outlet. Projection is easier than ownership. When we project our shadow, we fuel hatred and division. Healing comes from calling the shadow back, offering it dignity. This diminishes the collective shadow. Each act of inner work lightens the burden of the world. Kierkegaard called this spiritual exhaustion, the condition of the aesthete, chasing pleasure, but sinking into despair. The cure, he said, is paradox, a leap of faith towards something greater. It is a mistake to label some actions sacred and others profane. Real spirituality restores what has been divided. As William Blake said, "Go to heaven for form, to hell for energy, and marry the two." Most of us exhaust ourselves defending one half of the truth. But the sacred paradox is that both sides are real. To win and to lose are both good. To have and not to have. To rise and to fall. These are not contradictions. They are paradoxes, holy tensions that make life meaningful. What does paradox have to do with the shadow? Everything. Because paradox is only possible when the shadow is embraced. The journey is always conflict, paradox, revelation. That's the divine path. True transformation often begins when we have no way out, when every option feels wrong, when the ego reaches its limit. In that humility, something deeper awakens. The soul begins its return. In Tibetan Buddhism, mandalas symbolize the self-wholeness unity. Some teachers assign a single mandala for years of contemplation. But another sacred shape, the mandorla, is less known. Formed by the overlap of two circles, light and dark, it creates an almond-shaped center. In this space, we often see Christ or the Virgin Mary. The mandorla is the symbol of reconciliation. It is where opposites meet, not to fight, but to embrace. It shows us that healing doesn't come from clinging to the light or drowning in the dark, but from letting them touch. That space, the center, is where the divine dwells. And it's often in our lowest moments, when nothing seems to work, when life feels unbearable, that we become ready for the mandorla. And when we make space for both sides of our nature, strength and sorrow, fire and bloom, we find the holy ground. Eliot captured this perfectly. The fire and the rose are one. In that line he drew a mandorla, and in that truth we are made whole. When people asked Carl Jung whether humanity would survive the chaos of our time, he always answered, "If enough people will do their inner work, so do yours. Not just for you, but for all of us." Your spiritual growth contributes to the healing of the world, because when you embrace your shadow, you help light the way for the world.